Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, Parler, and Instagram. And of course, be sure to visit www.mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
Going up.
Can anyone hear me?
Going down.
Aria Wolf, your father is no longer of use to us. You have something we want.
You think this is a game? The way we should go.
Dad?
Aria?
We're out of time.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host Matthew Pejkovic and this is episode number 338. Releasing today, April 8 in Australian cinemas is Ascendant, an Australian-made sci-fi thriller that stars Charlotte Best as Aria Wolf, a young woman who finds herself abducted and trapped in a rigged elevator and has to find a power from within to overcome captivity and become her true self. Impressive in craft and engrossing in its world-building story, Ascendant also marks the directorial debut of Antaine Furlong, who I'm happy to say joins me now on the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. Anthony, thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, nice to meet you, mate. Thanks for having me.
So it's really interesting reading up about this movie. The initial idea you had for this film, I read that you were in the elevator one time, you're heading to a meeting, and a maintenance man was repairing the elevator. And from what I could read, it seemed like it was while the elevator was in operation, and that whole kind of scene and that whole kind of experience really stuck with you. And so how did that kind of spark the genesis of the movie that we've seen today?
Yeah, I think the first thing was, I'm afraid of heights.
Yeah, me too.
And so seeing someone have that level of control over a contraption that people, get in and get out of every single day all around the world fascinated me, terrified me at the same time. And he obviously there was nobody in the elevator that he was controlling. He was just maintaining it and making sure it was all working to the level it needs to be and all the safety standards required to make sure that it works and operates for the building. And there wasn't really at that time, because it was like 12 years ago, there wasn't a film ever made with this sort of concept, except I think a 1950s movie called The Cage.
Yes.
I think it is. And maybe 1960s or 70s, I can't remember now. It was black and white, I think. I just thought, wow, this is really relevant today. This is something I'd really like to do. But, it's taken me all this time because, look, I've lived around the world. I've done a lot of business around the world, and film was always something I really wanted to get into. But it's a difficult path for most and for all of us. And so, some things just take a lot longer than others. And eventually got there with this. But I think the big difference between the idea of just someone being confined and trapped in an elevator is to create greater character, greater depth to the story. What can you do more than just a person trapped in an elevator? What's the backstory? What's the life? Where's it going to go? Where do you want the characters to go? Is there a possibility of it ever being more than just a one-off film? And that's the sort of evolution that comes after the initial seed idea of someone trapped in an elevator.
And I think that's really important for people to understand. This isn't a novelty movie. It isn't just about, woman trapped in an elevator kind of thing. There's world building happening in the film. There's seeds being planted for future films. It's from what I read, the beginning of what could potentially be a trilogy. When that trilogy idea, how soon do you start fleshing out all these other concepts surrounding the film? Does it start with the character first, and then that character kind of like what you talk about with the character kind of creates the world building, or does the world building influence the character? How does it all kind of work out with you?
Yeah, look, I started probably a year ago on the second script. Although, I would say there's lots of stuff I want to do. I've got a few books coming out next year as well, being published on very completely different sort of concept type material. Those ones are actually more family orientated stories, which I'd like to turn into films down the track. But for this particular character, let's see. This is a journey. This is a journey as it would be like for a born character who is trying to find answers, who's trying to find who they are, what they're meant to be. While she starts to learn about who she is and what her past is, there's just so much more to this story. I haven't really quite fleshed out, and I've left it hanging. Is it the future or is it the present that you're watching in this film? So you don't really know whether it's the flashbacks are actually the present or whether they're the past, or whether what you're seeing with the character in the elevator is the future or whether it's the present. So I've left that as a key sort of story twist idea for the second script. But on a sort of a world building element, the visual effects are extremely important to me. I love them. I love them myself in film. But what I don't like is if they don't marry well with a story, a good story and a good character and a good emotion. Emotion is critical to me in this movie, into any movie I would want to do or any story I want to do. I think I've gone to so many big films and you come out a bit tasteless after it going, that was amazing visual effects, but that's all I got out of it. Yeah. And I was quite disappointed. So, we always look at these things as a cinema goer. I do first, especially when I'm looking at my material. What would I like to get out of this? And, maybe it's because I'm a father I've got 4 children. When her father's character, how she relates to dad, how he relates to her. And, there's a bit of that in me as well. It's that struggle of father, especially a father who's had to lie to his daughter for so long, in their life. It's that reaction that you have to do, that protection that you also go through, which I think sort of adds another layer to this story.
I'm curious about the film's title, Ascendant. Now, the original title of the film, from what I've found in my research, is Rising Wolf, and I think that of course has to do with the character's name being Arya Wolf and a lot of the things that happens with her character. When did that switch happen to Ascendant? And that switch to Ascendant, does that kind of tie in a lot of ways with the whole kind of world building thing? Are we going to see if future movies made with this storyline kind of like the film titles also to kind of like be in the same kind of theme of what Ascendant is?
Yeah, so, that's a really good question because I don't know if you know, but Samuel Gold, we just did a press release yesterday, Samuel Goldwyn Films have just signed a Rest of the World deal for this film, and they're reverting. They would prefer to revert to The Rising Wolf, which was that sort of working title we had, because obviously her surname is Wolf, and Rising has something to do with not just the fact that she's trapped in an elevator going up and down and, at the mercy of these terrorists, but it's also, there's a very, I guess, soul, spiritual, sort of, not reincarnation, but that sort of style of concept behind the word rising as well. What does it mean? It's it's that story of a girl who's had to become, who she was born to be and something she never thought she was. And so there's a lot of sort of interest into the word rising and Rising Wolf being the character, but also, wolf relating to the pack of wolves and how they operate as a family, protecting their young and all that kind of stuff. And so Samuel Goldwyn preferred to go with that title, whereas Maslow and myself, we really liked the word Ascendant just because it had a lot more sort of world building elements to it, but it also, had something to do with Ascendant. It itself has something to do with a lot of astrology and things like that, and what it means to people, characters, and this particular character. So, yeah, what the title will be that's an interesting one. I don't know.
Let's talk a bit about Aria Wolf, played by Charlotte Best. I read that you saw over 100 actresses for the role. Charlotte Best, terrific in the role. I mean, she's in the frame of the film the majority of the time. She really has to hold the screen. It's also quite a physical performance as well. When people see the film, they know exactly what I mean. Especially in regards to kind of the gravity, the elevator, all the stuff that's going on there. It's really quite impressive actually watching it. What was it about Charlotte that really spoke to you, especially in regards to her portrayal of Aria?
Yeah, it's look, it's a for the rookie filmmaker, it was quite an experience, I have to say, to go through the process, to see how intimidating it actually quite is, the casting process for actors. I really felt for them because it's a real, it's quite an unusual process, I have to say. I would not like to be an actor, frankly. I really feel for them because they have very little prep time when it comes in to do an audition. They don't know the people they're coming in to audition with unless they're familiar with the casting director. Or they've worked with the people before, which usually they wouldn't do an audition if they've worked with them before. But so for me, I really take my hat off to every single person that auditioned for this film because they were all amazing. And what I found quite interesting about the process from a director's point of view is you start to narrow down something that doesn't really make any sense as to why you're narrowing it down. And so you do have to look at yourself as a human being going, why am I picking this character? For what reasons? What am I trying to say? I've got 3 daughters, and I do think about things like that. I've got 3 daughters. What am I trying to pick this character? Because there was a lot of great performances in the audition, I have to say. Brilliant performance. So then you sort of start to narrow down what you're looking for in the character. So for me, it was really important that Aria has a Scandinavian element to her, and I don't mean by just hair color, having blonde there, which is very stereotypical, but the character she plays is a very big, well-known character in the world, in many mythologies around the world, whether it's in China, every country around the world has this character in their history, or mythological character, because in the end, Aria Wolf is to become the most powerful woman on the earth, and that personification of it. And so you sort of get this idea in your mind as to how you need them to look because of where your center point, where you in the next story where they were created, and that's when it comes down to you're down into 5 auditions left. And then, it's working, you meet them personally. And, I just felt, Charlotte is an extremely private person. She's very quiet. We talked about it. I talked to her about, that this is going to be an extremely intense 20 days. And I did, I think I've spoken about this before, about Ryan Reynolds in the film Buried. Yeah. And he did a great interview about the stress he went under, the emotional stress to just be in that state for the 17 days he had to do. And so he's a well-seasoned pro actor. And so, I was conscious, Charlotte has done a lot of television performances, but nothing quite to this level of stress and emotional stress that she'd have to keep herself in for most of the day. But she was totally up for it. And, we really just hit it off. And, I just found her, very likable. I felt I could see that she could do this. And I really, I think it was the best decision I made, that's for sure. When I asked if she could come on board, and she accepted, and it was a tough 20 days though. Tough for her, tough for me. It's not easy to be a director, working with someone who needs to be in an emotional state for 20 days. It's quite in your face,
A theme that I took from the film is that of potential. I think sometimes people feel trapped and they have to undergo hardship to truly become who they really are. Was potential kind of like a theme that you were kind of playing with in regards to this film, considering the things that Arya goes through, and also what the conclusions of her hardship is at the end of the film?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really important thing. So, for example, this is going off track a little bit, but I'll give you a perfect example of how I would view a character and how they need to deal with hardship. So, for example, when I was writing this script a long time ago, my daughter Kaya tripped over my computer cable, landed on her, bit her into her tongue, blood everywhere. We had to rush her to the hospital. My wife was so controlled and amazing. I was running around like a headless chicken. And here I thought I'd be the controlled human being. And so the reason I say that is we never know what we're going to be like in a situation of panic or drama or stress.
Yeah.
We don't know how we react to circumstances. And for me, I look at that. I always use that, even though it's a little bit, I try to make it a little bit comical, and my daughter is fine. She's amazing now. But that stressful moment, I looked at it and I looked at myself and I was like, that was quite interesting. It's not something I expected in myself. And so, I look at that with character. I even look at it with Johnny, who had an amazing performance in this. And that was a really difficult thing for him to do when you've got no one to play off either, so he's the same. Neither Charlotte or Johnny ever worked together on this. All his performances were done on camera, and then the rear projection was added later. And then Charlotte had to work off his performance on a screen with an earpiece to be able to listen to him. So for me, it was really important to apply that, learning who you are through a stressful environment, getting stronger, becoming, the woman that she knows. I guess she doesn't know, but inside, I guess she learns what she's going to be. But she's still uncertain by the end of the film. There's still so much more to tap into, which the script gets into. A lot more of the psychology, the stress. She's going to have elements of flashbacks as well, whether I tell it in the present or the past. That whole sort of cabin fever of being trapped inside such a confined space for so long.
Well, what's really interesting to me is that your own story in regards to this, I mean, you yourself are going through your own transition into film world and filmmaking, and your background is in finance and investing, which you've been very successful in. And now not only are you directing the movie and writing the movie, you actually opened up your own studio, Daydream Films. You're now making films, particularly high concept genre films, which to me is just like music to my ears, because I've always said that when it comes to Australian filmmaking, a lot of bases are covered, but I feel like one that isn't covered is the high concept genre film, which is a shame because we have the talent, we have the crews, and that because so many people, especially from the States, come to Australia to make exactly these kind of films, but we're not making them ourselves. So when it came to Daydream Films, how long ago did you know that this was something you wanted to do, and what did you feel the time was right for you to take that plunge and take that transition and really kind of, step into a new world, which you're doing right now with the release of Ascendant?
Look, that's a great question, and I think you're going to find a lot of actors and a lot of filmmakers feel exactly the same way as you. I mean, Alex Proyas is a good example. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. Is a good example of a homegrown director who did high concept material, had high concept ideas, and ended up having to go to the United States to continue on in that path. I think we're in a much better place in the market here in Australia. Look, you have all the stars are here, and let's face it. Look, they all do their little independent Screen Australia kind of movies, and then they leave. They all go to LA and they hope to get their break, and they all got their break. I mean, Chris Hemsworth and Hugh Jackman, they all got their world status working on American films. But they're here now. They've done the big American thing, and I think it's really a great time for everybody to start making Australian films. And that doesn't need to be just Australian stories. But I mean, I can't see why you can't create a superhero character here or a zombie movie here or anything else that the British have been doing. So, I mean, Americans have been doing it, and they're the best, at that sort of comfort level of doing anything, creating anything that they think is crazy or whatever. But, I mean, I look at the British model similar to here, except we're in the infancy stage. But, you look at 20 years ago in the UK, they didn't do anything. I mean, they were struggling like they had a very similar, do very independent, low-budget sort of movies. They never did anything big. And then that sort of transition started to change. And now they do everything. Now they can do everything from a zombie movie to a science fiction film. They do everything now, and nothing's stopping them. And I think Australia really needs that energy. It's got the talent, the visual effects, the directors, the writers, the actors. They're world class. They're as good as anybody in the world. And some of the biggest movies ever made are either Australian directors, cinematographers, visual effects companies, or actors and writers. And so the question is, why can't we?
Yeah.
And I think I'm hoping with a lot of these American films coming in at the moment, they're starting to see, wow, we can make every American film that we've always made here in Australia. And I think that's why is it the head of is it Disney that's coming over for the next 4 or 5 years to do a heap of their movies. So I think it'll train the global investors to look at Australia and look at Australian productions as an international sort of acquisition, I'd say, because they're always investing into the idea of a story. It's an acquisition from their mentality because they have to invest and look at the risk of every project that they would do. And look, that's how I look at films here. You have, Screen Australia are there for a lot of those films that may not get the mass market that an investor would need to feel comfortable, because they look at returns. And I think that Australia definitely has tools to make high concept projects, without a doubt.
We are also very fortunate in now where we are geographically, considering when something like COVID does hit, we can bounce back rather quickly. And something that we can do that unfortunately people over in the UK and the US can't do is go to the cinemas right now. And I know that with Ascendant, you especially want people to watch this film in the cinemas. The visuals scream out for that, the story screams out for that. I'm just curious, and when it came to the first time you saw the film in the cinema with an audience for the first time, what was that experience like for you to see your vision on the screen, a film that you made, you produced, you wrote, being shared with an audience? What was that experience like?
It's probably not. I think everybody else was more excited than I was. That's for sure. I've seen this film probably about 1,000 times at this stage, and we had a sort of a hybrid cast and crew, private premiere there last week, I think it was, and all the cast were there, and a lot of the crew that could make it, because some of them are up in Queensland and they couldn't get down. And then some family members were all there. And look, everybody was super excited. But look, in being the writer and director, you're always going to be critical. You're always going to be sitting there staring at it going, I wish I did this. I wish I'd done that. I wish I had more money for this. I wish I could have done that. And that's the nature. And I think you'll find, if you ask every director, if they're going to be honest about it, it is very nerve-wracking. It's very, you're putting your heart out there for everybody to look at. I mean, you really are. And I mean, it's funny. I'm being a hypocrite here, where I've walked out of a film, a big budget film, and I'm like looking at going, God, that was rubbish. That was terrible. And then I have to check myself and go, that was hundreds of people's work, hard work that they put all their emotions and excitement into. And then so I look at my own, and it's very intimidating. I mean, it really is. I think when you learn the process and how difficult it is to write a script that people may want to see or will want to see, and then go through the process of making it and collaborating with all these great people who bring their emotions and ideas together, it really opens your eyes to how you look at films for the rest of your life. So I look at movies very differently now than I did before I did this. I look at them and just all I can see is the amount of work that people put into this, the talent that was put into this. And, you know, there's just a greater amount of respect that I have for the process. But I find it extremely intimidating because it's, I'm putting everything I've dreamt and created and wanted to do and my heart and work and blood, sweat and tears into a project. And it's going straight out there today in the cinemas. And no doubt there's going to be people who I hope will love it, lots of them. And then there are just going to be people who will probably be similar to myself, you know, a few years ago, just walk out and go, yeah, it's not for me. But that's the movie business, you know.
So for everyone out there listening out in Australian cinemas today, Ascendant, go out, watch it in cinemas, support Australian film. And for my listeners in the US, it looks like there is going to be a release date of July 16 over there, theatrical release. And from what I can read, Rising Wolf might be the title we're going with. Are we 100% on that for US release, Anthony?
I think they are. At this stage, it's literally we just signed the deal on Thursday, Wednesday, and so I'm pretty sure. I think the only thing they may look at changing it, depending on how the box office results go here in Australia and New Zealand, because it's crossing New Zealand as well today.
So make sure everyone out there in Australia to check out Ascendant in Australian cinemas. And Antaine Furlong, I thank you very much for your time today. And congratulations with the movie. And I wish you nothing but the best with the release.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.